This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
Attention all high school students. The SAT is undergoing some major changes and the new exam will make its debut in March of this year. From an increase in curriculum-based questions to a revamped essay section, there are a number of changes you need to know about before taking the test. And here to give us the scoop on the new SAT is Sheba Lowe Brown, president of A+ Test Prep. Sheba, welcome back to Tar Heel Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. We really appreciate the opportunity.
So the SAT has undergone what many say is a long overdue makeover. Talk a little bit about some of the major changes in this new test.
One of the major changes is the changes in the scoring. The current SAT is out of 2,400, 800 for math, 800 for reading, 800 for writing. When the new test starts in March, the highest new score will be 1,600.
Okay.
So as I told my parents yesterday, we're probably dating ourselves because you and I probably remember the 1,600 old scale.
I remember
So
that.
we're going to be going back to 1,600, 800 for evidence-based reading and writing, and 800 for math. Another major change is going to be the essay. It's going to go from 25 minutes to 50 minutes. It's going to become optional at many schools. Another change is going to be the math. Half the math on the new SAT will be no calculator allowed. So students are going to complete half the math on the new SAT without the benefit of a calculator. And that's going to be really different, very different.
And will the math questions be different as well? Will there be a lot of charts and graphs? And I know you have a graphic that kind of lays out all the differences.
Oh, yeah. There will be an increase in reading charts and graphs in the reading, but the math is also going to step up its game in terms of the content. Currently, the SAT is algebra and geometry, and the new SAT is going to step up and include some trig and pre-calculus. So the math game is going to really change.
And what about when you're talking about, I know this is one that I remember having the flashcards, trying to remember these words that I could not even pronounce.
Yep.
That too is changing. The vocabulary is changing.
Yep. What students know as the sentence completion, fill in the blank with all of these sometimes obscure words. Those questions will be coming off of the new test, and instead the SAT is going to focus more on assessing student vocabulary and context. So no more complete the sentence with the best word or pair of words. Those questions are going to go away.
So it's more using familiar words, but you having to understand the meaning and the context of those words.
So it's supposed to be more meaningful, more real world, more applicable to what we're accustomed to having to do every day, in school, on our jobs, in terms of vocabulary and context.
How does this relate to Common Core? I know a lot of school districts across the country have gone to Common Core. Is this shift in the SAT a result of Common Core? Do they go hand in hand? Are they even related?
They are absolutely hand in hand. Just like ACT is aligned to Common Core, the SAT will now be aligned to Common Core as well. So it will be testing more along the lines of what students are accustomed to getting in their coursework every day in school. So absolutely, in terms of citing evidence, reading informational text, understanding core math concepts, very much aligned with Common Core.
So how do you prepare students for this new SAT?
Well, first thing we do is really encourage students to read a lot. Clearly, students who do a lot of reading, not just for school, but just reading for pleasure, reading leisurely, have an easier time on the SAT than students who do not read. But one of the things that we do is that we offer prep courses to help students, not necessarily teaching them anything new, but how to hone the skills that they already have and apply those to not only just the SAT or the ACT, but things like critical reading, vocabulary and context, writing on a timed basis, citing evidence when you write and form an argument. Those are things that are not only applicable to just SAT and ACT, but are also very helpful for students in their academic coursework as well.
Absolutely. I just thought of another change to the new SAT is there will be no penalty for wrong answers. That is major.
That is right. Right now, the current test is a quarter point off for every answer that's wrong. When the test changes in March, There will be no penalty for wrong answers. It will go to what's called rights-only scoring, and the questions will only have 4 answer choices instead of 5. So I'm already telling my students, hey, your odds are going up here with the new test. So I think that's a great change.
With all of the changes, do you feel like the SAT is going to be easier or harder for students?
I don't think it's going to be harder necessarily, but I do think it's going to be challenging in different kinds of ways. So, for example, with the reading, right now it's just, reading comprehension. On the new test, there are going to be some questions. Perhaps one question might say, provide, what is the theme of paragraph 1? The follow-up question might say, please cite the evidence that supports the theme identified for paragraph 1. And that's an entirely different ball game. In the past, perhaps students might be able to guess their way to the theme, but now it's time to actually engage with the paragraph and identify what evidence and specific text supports that particular theme. And that's an entirely different skill.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be very different.
Absolutely. And so the questions kind of build on each other. If you miss the first one, it's kind of a snowball effect. Chances are you're not going to get
time disorder. And a student asked yesterday in a seminar, well, does that mean that if the questions, if I miss the first one, I'm going to automatically miss the second one? Not necessarily, but it's going to be difficult to get that second one right. They're graded independently. It's going to be 2 separate points, but those 2 separate points are predicated on that one particular idea. And that's what's going to be a really big change.
So when you look at the changes overall and you're working with students, are you encouraging them to read? Are there still math questions they can practice? How does it work in preparing now for the new test?
One of the things is just really encouraging the reading and reading all kinds of texts. That's one thing that I know Common Core really stresses is not only just fictional texts, but informational texts, and also real world text from history, text from science, text and ideas as they're represented in charts and graphs. So that's going to be a very different piece. So we're talking about students being able to prepare for the new assessments really in their history class, in their biology class, in their psychology class, in their health class, because all the time students are having to assess data, read charts, draw inferences. Those are the kinds of things that the tests are going to rely more heavily on.
And with the essay now being optional, is it important for a student to first check with the schools in which they are applying before they opt out of that essay?
Absolutely. I hope I'm not going to misspeak out of turn here, but I do believe, for example, Duke and UNC Chapel Hill. Duke is going to continue to require the essays for the SAT and for the ACT. When the new test starts in March, the essay will be optional at UNC Chapel Hill. So it's really important that students find out at the individual colleges and universities what their particular policy regarding the essay is going to be.
Okay. How can, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's better, I'm encouraging students, it's better to go ahead and do the essay from the beginning.
Right.
That way, if your college list happens to change and you realize that, oops, this school requires the essay, but, oh, my score doesn't, I didn't take the essay, so now I'm back at square one. Well, I have to go back and take it again because it's not available as an add-on or anything like that later on. Either you take the test with the essay or you take the test and you're without it.
Okay, so your advice is to do the essay.
Yes, just in case. Just in case. You never know what colleges may end up on your list.
How can people find out more information about A+ Test Prep?
Our website is aplushigherscores.com, and that's, you spell out the A+, A-P-L-U-S, higher, H-I-G-H-E-R, scores.com, and our number, 919-824-3912. We're also all over social media. We have a Facebook page, A+ Test Prep, and Twitter, A+ Test Prep. And we encourage parents to reach out. If you just have any questions whatsoever, reach out. We're all about trying to get the information. We are amazed. We just did a couple of seminars late last week, and we realized that there are still some students who don't know when the new test is starting. One young lady thought that it started in August, of this next school year. And I understand why that is, because so many students are tuned into the school calendar. And this new change is happening right in the middle of the spring semester. So I encourage parents to reach out with any questions that they have.
Right. That information it's so critical
Absolutely.
and important. The timing is
Yes.
everything when it comes to taking the SAT.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
We're going to take a break. We'll talk more in
Awesome.
just a minute.
Thanks.
Up next, SAT or ACT? Which test gives you the best shot at a college acceptance? We'll have the answer when Tar Heel Talk continues. Starting in March, high school students who take the SAT in 2016 will face a very different test than those who came before them, from an increase in curriculum-based questions to a revamped essay section and more. And with us again to tell us more about the new SAT is Sheba Lowe Brown, president of A+ Test Prep. Now, Sheba, before the break, we were talking about some of those major changes in the SAT, this new SAT that starts in March. It sounds a lot like the ACT. So let's talk a little bit about the two and how they compare now with the new changes.
Yeah, I don't think it's accidental that they seem to be a whole lot more alike once the new SAT comes on board fully in March. One of the things that's very similar between the two tests, 4 answer choices. That's one thing that's very similar. Rights-only scoring. Neither test will penalize a student for a wrong answer. And the SAT essay will be 50 minutes. The ACT essay will be 40 minutes. Both the essays will be optional for students. So as you pointed out before the break, it's really important for students to check with their individual colleges and universities about whether they will require the essay. They're going to be a lot more alike than ever before. Both are aligned with Common Core. So that was an excellent point. They're going to be a lot more alike than ever.
So some students, as families try to make these decisions, because these tests are not cheap, and they're trying to make the decision on which test to take, I know that in the last 2 years, more families or more students are opting for the ACT. Now that we have this change in the SAT, that makes them more aligned, that could change that statistic. But when it comes to looking at what colleges want, is there a test? Should you take the SAT over the ACT or vice versa?
There is no benefit in taking one test over the other. Colleges and universities accept both SAT and ACT equally. And there are a number of colleges and universities across the country, about 850 or so, that are what are called test optional or test adaptive, meaning they don't require SAT or ACT for admission at all. Like here in North Carolina, Wake Forest comes to mind. But what students really want to keep in mind is that even if a school is test optional, lots of times if they want to get scholarship money or apply or qualify for scholarships, those are going to require SAT or ACT scores. So that's something important to keep in mind.
Right. And when you're talking about the SAT versus the ACT, there are a lot of myths that you work to dispel for students and for parents alike. One of those is, we talked about colleges preferring the SAT. You saying that's not necessarily true.
Not true. Not
Another
true at all.
is that students have to take the SAT to get into college.
I think about our oldest son, who is a senior this year. He has never taken the SAT. He has applied to 4 different schools. He's already gotten into 2 of them. He has never taken the SAT. It has not hurt him one bit in the process. I encourage students to look at their ACT plan scores, look at their PSAT scores. Those are 2 preliminary exams that really give a student a picture of kind of where they are in terms of each assessment. And going forward, they can make some informed decisions about which particular test might be best suited. As a matter of fact, we're doing a seminar on Saturday about SAT versus ACT. And it's just really important that a student, one, know what kind of learner am I? You know, what kinds of questions in the way they're worded and assessments kind of appeal to me as a learner. Another thing to think about is how the timing of the tests works. As we said, they're going to be a little bit more alike than ever, but for example, on the ACT, there's the math, which is 1 hour long. Some students who have difficulty concentrating, after the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes, they're lost. They're not keeping up with their time. There's a great chance in that case they're not going to finish the test, and answer all the questions. That's really important, as opposed to the SAT, which has 2 smaller math sections. So that can make a difference. So it's those little nuances that students want to pick up on, what works for me as a test taker. And then another thing is going to be the timing of the test. So typically, for example, the ACT is given in September, October, and December. Let's see, February, the state of North Carolina gives every junior in the state the opportunity to take the ACT at no cost on March 1st this year. Students can also take the ACT in April and in June. The SAT tends to be offered in the other months, October, November, December, January, March, May, and June. So especially for spring test takers, I ask students to think about when is prom, when's AP exams, those kinds of things. When are semester exams? So right now my students who are preparing for the January 23rd SAT, they're right in the midst of semester exams at their school. So there are lots of different things to think about in terms of picking a test and a test date.
And when you talk about timing for tests, especially your junior year, we know that that's a big year for students. You want to make sure that you time it so that you can take it more than once before you're a senior, preferably before you're a senior.
We really try to encourage families to have at least the test admissions component, the admissions test component of college admissions out of the way by the end of the junior year. That's so important. Because then, excuse me, the student can spend summers visiting colleges, looking for scholarships, working on that ever so important application essay. I see so many students focusing so much on SAT or ACT, and I ask, well, how's your essay, your admissions essay coming? Oh, Miss Brown, I hadn't even started that. That's just as crucial as anything could possibly be, especially if you're looking. I have a student who's his transcript is, as a ninth grader, wasn't very solid. He needs a really strong essay and a really strong personal statement to talk about, how I've grown as a student and that kind of thing. But at that point, he hadn't even started the essay. And that's going to be really just as important as his test scores.
Absolutely. Lots of factors that go into choosing a test and planning, just getting a plan together to apply to college. A lot going on.
And tests are just one small part of it. It's not the end all be all, but like I tell students, it's the one thing. It's the one malleable thing all the way up to graduation. By May of the senior year, you can't do anything about your class rank, your GPA, your volunteering. That's all set in stone. But that SAT or that ACT score, you still got a chance to take it if that school will accept it.
Extremely important.
Extremely.
We'll be back with more on the new SAT after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. The new SAT begins in March of this year, and there are a number of changes in this exam, from the no penalty for wrong answers to more familiar vocabulary words. And today's guest is bringing us up to speed on the new SAT, and she is Sheba Lowe Brown, president of A+ Test Prep. Sheba, with all these changes, it's important for not only the student, but for parents to know so they can offer some guidance to their students in terms of, number one, which test to take, SAT or ACT, and then how to prepare for that.
Absolutely. One of the things that parents can do is just encourage their students to be wide readers, to read a lot, lots of different texts. Don't necessarily tell them what to read, just encourage them to read lots of it. As I say to my students all the time, get off of Snapchat and turn off Netflix and get in the book. That will make a really, really, really big difference. Sometimes students are so used to reading a sentence here, a snippet there, a paragraph there. And so when they're called on for the SAT or the ACT to read a huge chunk of texts, to cite evidence, to draw inferences, it's really difficult for them to do that because they're not used to doing it on a regular basis. But just encouraging students to take a rigorous course load in high school. That is very important. What we find is that students who continue to challenge themselves, especially with honors and AP courses, I'm not saying a student needs to go in and take 5 AP courses in one semester. That's not what I'm saying. But if the opportunity is there, challenge. We talk a lot in educational circles about productive struggle. Sometimes if a student's opting in for that higher level course, that AP or that honors, they may find at first that the grades, the A's, the B's don't come too easily. but they're making progress toward that, and that's important to grow academically. And access and participating in those rigorous courses goes a long way to preparing not only for SAT and ACT, but academic success after high school.
And it sounds like the new test will require more critical thinking skills when you're talking about the inference and different things like that.
Yes. Drawing inferences in terms of citing evidence. How do you support an argument? One of the best examples of that is going to be the new SAT essay, where it's going to require students to analyze a document, to analyze how an author builds an argument. It requires a student to build an argument of his or her own, to evaluate the author's use of evidence, and to cite evidence of the student's own as they discuss the author's argument. I mean, it gets, one skill building on another. That's an excellent example of it's no longer just rote memorization. It's a lot of critical thinking. And wide reading and academic rigor goes a long way to preparing a student for that.
So starting even before ninth grade, if you can get into some advanced courses, I know some middle schools will offer that, but especially in high school, taking those advanced courses when you can in a reasonable load will definitely help prepare for the new exam.
Absolutely. One thing that as students begin to take those higher level courses, we were talking about a little bit ago was about the math. One thing that I would caution parents about is that students will say, well, Ms. Brown, I'm taking calculus right now. That's going to be great for the SAT, right? Hey, Mr. Brown, I'm in AFM. Is that going to help me on the ACT? And it's not really. Most of the math on the ACT, there are 60 math questions. 54 of them are algebra and geometry.
Oh, wow.
There's a little slice of trig in there. Even when the new SAT comes on board in March, most of the math is going to be algebra and geometry. A little bit of pre-calc, a little bit of trigonometry. But the core basics are algebra and geometry. And sometimes by the time a student gets to 11th or 12th grade, algebra and geometry were eons ago.
Right.
And they've forgotten that core knowledge for algebra and geometry that they're going to need to be successful on the math portion of the test.
And that's where you come in a lot of times with helping students and preparing them so that they have an idea of what to expect on these exams. How can people connect with you and talk about a little bit about the work that you do in helping prepare students for these standardized tests?
One of the things that we do is we offer courses in conjunction with every single test date. So for example, the ACT that the public schools will be giving to juniors on March 1st at no cost. Our ACT course begins 4 weeks before the test, and it meets twice a week on a regular basis up until the test. So if the course ends on Thursday, the test is the following Tuesday. There's no lag time. Students are constantly preparing. We give students access to our instructors outside of class. I mean, students text me in the middle of the night, hey, Ms. Brown, I have a question about page 50. Can I call you tomorrow morning and talk to you about that? I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Parents will call and say, oh, and I want to talk to you about what Johnny needs to do next to get his scores up. I hope we're not bothering you. You're not bothering me at all. This is what I love to do.
Right. And people can connect with you by calling 919-824-3912, or they can go to your website, aplushigherscores.com, and you do spell out plus, APLUSHIGHERSCORES.com.
That's it.
Maybe I need to take your course a little bit. But definitely, it's important now that you have the changes to the SAT, they're coming, and if you want to get into college, a lot of times you have to take either the SAT or the ACT if you're going to a college that requires testing.
Absolutely. And it's just important that students, whether they take SAT or ACT, that they pick a college that's a good fit for them. They know what their testing policy is, and that they have a plan of action so their senior year is not as stressful. That it's not stressful at all.
Right. Excellent advice. Sheba Lowe Brown, President of A+ Test Prep. Always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, send us a message on our Facebook page or an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.